Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good morning and welcome to Ethical Perspectives in the News. My name is Pete Welch and I'm the host for this morning's show, the last show we're going to be doing of the year. And today's topic is the Bakken pipeline. It's been in the news recently. We're in the process of talking about it, placing it in Iowa. And I've got some guests this morning that are going to visit with us. First with us this morning is Bill Gerhard, who's the president of the Iowa State Building Construction Trades Council. Good morning, Bill.
Hey, good morning.
And also next with us is Cheryl Valenta, who is an environmentalist. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
And last we have Rob Hogg, who's a state senator from here in the Cedar Rapids area, and also is an attorney with Eldick and Perney, a law firm here. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Peter.
Good. First of all, can we talk about what the pipeline is so that our clients and our people that are watching the program this morning know what it's all about? Rob, you probably have had a lot of contact with some of this.
Well, sure, in general, and Bill and Cheryl can fill in extra details, but the proposal is to run a crude oil pipeline from northwest Iowa to southeast Iowa to move oil that's being produced in the Bakken region of North Dakota to refineries on the Gulf Coast. That's the proposal. Iowa is one of the states in this proposed route. And there is a pending proposal right now from the company that wants to develop this pipeline, Energy Transfer Partners, to build this pipeline, and they have to get approval under our current laws. That company needs to get approval from the Iowa Utilities Board. And there's been a lengthy hearing in front of the Iowa Utilities Board. The parties are submitting their comments, and we expect that there'll be a decision from the Utilities Board sometime in 2016 about whether this project is approved, and if it's approved, what are the terms that the Iowa Utilities Board says the company has to meet in order to build the project.
Now, Bill, are you? We're talking. Is this above ground, below ground?
Well, it's below ground. It's a pipeline. It's underground. I think there's I would say it averages probably 4 foot underground. Goes from, like you said, northwest Iowa to southeast Iowa through 17 counties. It's a 30-inch diameter pipeline. It can probably move 500,000 barrels of oil a day through it. And it goes to, like you said, it's going to end up in the Gulf Coast or refineries in Illinois. Starts in North Dakota, goes through South Dakota, Iowa, then parts of Illinois, and it goes to, I think it's Patoka, Illinois is where the terminal is. And then from there it goes to other places. And it's my understanding, Rob, that it's been approved in South Dakota and Illinois already. And so Iowa's sort of the last place the utility board has to rule on it.
Okay, now as I understood, these are the shale oil fields that are in North Dakota and possibly Montana. So it's a new construction from up in the fields all the way to where it hooks up to system in Illinois. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And so that would be the economic footprint of the building from Montana to Illinois?
Well, North Dakota to Illinois.
North Dakota.
Yes.
And Cheryl, how do you feel on this as a topic? I mean, is Iowa, should we fall in line with the other states, or what is there anything we're missing?
Well, I gained my information about the pipeline from attending the community hearings that were held in the 18 different counties. I attended one and had a lot of questions when I left, and people were only allowed one question at a time. So I went to a second one and ended up going to actually 4 different community hearings to learn more about what would be involved with the pipeline, and really became concerned about Dakota Access, who is going to build their very first crude oil pipeline, when at each meeting they would answer the questions in a different way. So I heard a lot of inconsistencies about the information that they were providing, and I decided to get involved with the Bakken Pipeline Resistance Coalition at that time, and have been involved ever since. And so, I have a lot of different concerns, whether they're about climate change, whether they're about the nature of Dakota Access, and also about the Bakken region. As I got online and kind of studied up on what the latest is in that area, the rigs there that are currently working are at the same numbers as 2009. So they're scaling back. You look at the gas prices are below $2 right now, and it's really a basic economics supply and demand kind of thing, where there's plenty of supply and not as much demand. Therefore, the price is low, and I'm not sure how viable it's going to be in the future.
Okay, now you mentioned an organization, the Resistance Organization. If we have viewers that are interested in seeing what that is there a website, or is there somewhere they can go to get information?
Bakken.com.
Okay, so if they did a search on No Bakken, they can trail and see what points you're making and follow up on that, can't they?
Right, and there's landowner stories on there. There's a lot of information about economic analysis. There's a lot of information on nobakken.com on that website.
Okay. Rob, where's the legislature isn't really passing judgment on this, it's the Utilities Board, isn't it?
Yeah, the Iowa State Legislature, before I was there, passed a law in the 90s that set up how pipeline decisions are made. And we did entertain some legislative proposals last year to change that. The two major proposals that were out there, one was to change the amount of financial assurance that the company would have to provide. Right now, the state law says $250,000, and that's, in my view, is an inadequate amount. And the second was the eminent domain issues. So what the process is, if the Utilities Board says it can go ahead, the Utilities Board also gets to say, can this company take the easements from Iowa landowners to build it? And obviously, eminent domain is a big issue. I personally not a big fan of it, but not just for pipelines. You also see it on roads or water projects, lots of places. That's something we don't want to have the government authorize companies to use just willy-nilly, right? There have to be some good rules. So there were some legislative discussions about it, but the outcome of that was the legislature didn't take any action. And so it is going off this law in the 1990s, the Utilities Board gets to make the decision. And, it's a big decision, because you're going to say, can this out-of-state company force an Iowa landowner, many of whom have had farms in their families for a long time, give this easement? There's also the issue with water, and that was the financial assurance issue. If there is a spill, and, I don't think this pipeline would be any more likely to spill than any other pipeline, and maybe less likely with the scrutiny, but there's still that risk. And if there is a spill, what happens to Iowa's water? What happens to the pipeline in the long term? And then, of course, as Cheryl mentioned, the climate change issue is really important. This is not the type of pipeline Iowa has had built. Iowa has lots of pipelines. There are lots of pipelines, but this is a little bit different because significantly different because of the amount of crude oil that would go through it. We only have, when I asked the Utilities Board, they said we only have 2 currently permitted crude oil pipelines. One is defunct, and the other crosses about 12 miles of Iowa in southeast Iowa. So A, this is a very large pipeline. Second, we don't have many crude oil pipelines. And so there's some risk with this. And if you do the math, the amount of oil that would go through this pipeline is equivalent to something like 15 coal-burning power plants. Now, is it the Utilities Board to make a decision about national and international climate policy? Well, in my view, it's all of our responsibilities to deal with climate change. None of us asked for the problem, but we do need to deal with it. And so I have some really serious concerns about the pipeline. Bill should probably get a chance to talk about his views on the benefit to workers from it, though, because those benefits are significant, and I want people to have work. So that's the tough decision right now.
It's the trade-off, if you will. Bill, would you?
I'd be glad to talk about this. There's a lot of reasons I'm in favor of this pipeline. Jobs is one of them. This is going to generate 4,000 construction jobs. And in pipeline work, and I've been around pipelines most of my construction career, Pipelines are long hours, long days. People can make a lot of money. A lot of those people are going to be Iowa workers. The contractors they've picked are union contractors, so the people are going to be making a high hourly wage, and they're going to have health insurance, they're going to have pension benefits. Another reason I'm in support of the pipeline is we're going to need oil for quite a while until we make the transition into something that's easier on the climate. And until that time, it's almost an environmental malpractice not to use pipelines, because that oil is going to be shipped by rail or by truck if we don't do it on pipelines. Now, we read the paper all the time about derailments of rail cars. They had a crude oil train derail in Canada and killed 47 people in one of those towns. Just last summer, south of Galena, Bakken oil, crude oil railroad train derailed, and the oil spilled into the Mississippi River. You probably saw photos of that, smoke and fire and everything. That train was going 25 miles an hour. We don't have the infrastructure to move this oil by rail. So every barrel of oil that goes through the pipeline is not being shipped by train. So that's good.
Or over the road.
Or over the roads. And lastly, I think it's national security. You probably remember this. You two are probably too young, but in the late 70s and early 80s, OPEC had their boot on our throat. OPEC's a cartel from the Mideast. We had lines at the gas stations. Mm-hmm. We were not supposed to turn on Christmas lights. And the whole mantra after that was let's become energy independent. We have an opportunity now to be energy independent, and this is sort of personal with me. I have a 19-year-old son and a 16-year-old son. I don't want them or anyone's sons and daughters going to the Mideast fighting for oil when we have it domestically here. So I'm in favor of this pipeline for a lot of reasons. In eminent domain, my understanding, almost 77% of the land has been acquired by voluntary negotiations with the company. I'm sure the company would like to have 100%, but you can't let a few landowners step in the way and be in the way of a project like this. So I hope they don't have to use eminent domain. I hope they get everything resolved, but if they have to, they have to. We wouldn't have an interstate system without eminent domain.
Maybe we should go ahead and talk about the process of eminent domain, and for the purposes of our viewers, they should understand that eminent domain is the taking of property owners' rights for something else. And then one of the issues here, I think Rob didn't go into it, but it can be a taking of eminent domain for public good, or in this case, it's a private company. And therein lies two different standards between public and private.
Yeah, Peter, I actually would prefer, if government's going to take property, that the government agency take the property. But what the legislature decided in the 90s, and I think there are some unsettled legal issues on this, but what the legislature decided in the 90s is the Utilities Board could authorize these out-of-state pipeline companies to take Iowans property. This is not an electric utility that's serving Iowans, right? These are out-of-state companies that are just trying to move the oil through Iowa. So there's some real concern there, and I have concern about not only who's taking it, but it is really intrusive, and it may be 77% is the number I've heard, Bill, but that 23% reflects owners who own, I don't know, maybe I'm doing my math really quick, 80 miles of pipeline route. So there are a lot of people out there who do not want this pipeline coming through their property, and that's something that the Utilities Board needs to weigh in. It's something that the public needs to consider. And eminent domain, that's pretty invasive. And then the question comes up, well, are you protected if there is a spill? Let's say the pipeline's built and they've taken the swath through your property to build the pipeline. What if there is a spill? Are you protected? And that is a concern that I have. I do think that this overriding concern on energy policy and what we're going to do is a real important issue. We have a international framework now to deal with climate change. And that's a major step forward to have 196 nations of the world say, yeah, we've got to deal with this problem. None of us asked for the problem, but unfortunately we've got to deal with it. We need an urgent transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. This is just the Iowa example of where this problem is coming up. And in my view, right, we can have a full employment economy without, without sort of investing in fossil fuels. We've got energy solutions that work, electric vehicles, fuel efficient vehicles. We could be building a lot of infrastructure for rail improvements. So we have a lot of alternatives that work. We do not need this pipeline. And so the legal issue will become, well, is it in the public convenience or necessity? The policy issue is, should we be investing more in fossil fuel infrastructure at some risk to our environment, at some risk to landowners' rights, knowing what we know about climate change? And for me, the answer is no. We can't have a vibrant, full employment economy without this pipeline. And that's the direction I'd like to see Iowa move, away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible.
Okay. Cheryl, have you heard enough from the meetings that you've attended that you feel reassured that these folks know what they're doing, either from the construction standpoint or the protecting the water table, or just the impact on nature putting in the pipeline?
Are you talking about Dakota Access?
All of the
when you
people
say
involved,
these folks?
the Dakota Access, the people doing the construction, have they shown you plans on how they're going to protect the Iowa landowners and the Iowa land?
The more I hear about the company and the more I hear landowner stories, the more I get concerned about the pipeline. I've heard from landowners that have been told that Dakota Access already had eminent domain. And I've heard different stories from landowners that how they have been treated by this company, that I have a lot of concerns in how they do their business. And so, like Rob said, climate change is a concern. I am concerned for jobs. I know that we've, in the meetings that I've gone to, there's been a lot of talk about from the union trades and the construction folks that do need jobs. And I would kind of add on to Rob's message in that, there's a lot of renewable energy that can be implemented now. We have solutions for climate change now, and really I feel like Iowa is actually a leader in the Midwest and in the nation with our wind energy, and I feel like it's time to continue with that trend. There's a lot to do with solar. So there are solutions out there. I think the Bakken pipeline is not in the best interest of Iowans. I've read somewhere where the average pipeline leaks 91 times in its lifetime. I'm not convinced at all that this pipeline is safe. It's going under, 92% of it's going under our farmland. It's going under the Mississippi River, the Des Moines River. Any tiny, hole that's going to be created in this pipeline is going to quickly be a massive spill because of 570,000 barrels that are going through it every day. And it's not your typical oil, it's very explosive as well. It has carcinogens in it, and for a state that prides itself in being agriculture state, it makes no sense whatsoever to put a crude oil pipeline right through, diagonally through all of it. I mean, farmers, I don't know a lot about farming, but farmers go north, south, east, west. Everything aligns north, south, east, west. And to come through diagonally is nothing but rude for this company to be so cocky that they think that it's okay to just come through our state like that.
So if you're not for the pipeline, you're okay with the risk of the rail transport and the truck transport of the same crude?
The Dakota Access rep that I heard from at 4 different meetings said that rail will not be, the transportation by rail will not change.
Well, I tend to disagree on that because I've been to a lot of those hearings too. I think if they can move those 500,000 barrels of oil a day, that's going to be 500,000 barrels of oil that's not going to go on the rail. I mean, it's just common sense. There might still be some rail service involved, and this goes to another subject too. Look at the impact on our farmers because all these trains and rail cars are being used to transport Bakken oil. Wouldn't it be better if they were used to transport grain like they're supposed to? And
They're not having a problem with transporting grain right now.
They aren't?
No.
Okay. That's news to me. And the other thing is, this thing about pipelines leaking, we have 30,000 miles of pipeline under Iowa now.
None of them are crude oil. Well,
Some are crude
Rob
oil,
said one
but
was
others
crude
are
oil.
natural gas. I mean, it doesn't matter. A
But
lot of our
it's-
hazardous materials are being pushed underground through pipelines through Iowa to the tune of 30,000 miles. So I'm not convinced that just because there's a pipeline, it's going to leak. I think they have highly skilled people, and I know the pipe fitters and the welders that do this, they do it for a living. They x-ray each weld. They take a lot of safety precautions. If you were at those hearings, you know that every time they cross a stream, there's a valve on either side, so if something happens, they can shut the pipeline off. They got sensors along the way. They monitor it by air.
There's manual valves. Those valves are manual, which means they have to actually go to that site and turn them off if something were to happen.
I would just jump in and say, I mean, I think we trust that the workers are going to do the best job. But the record is we've had some really significant oil spills in this country. Mayflower, Arkansas, the Kalamazoo River, the Yellowstone River all had damages, cleanup costs, not damages, but cleanup costs that exceeded $70 million. So there's a risk. There's a risk. Despite the best efforts of the workers involved and the companies, there's going to be a risk. And that's something that I think the state has to weigh. The state also has to weigh the climate change. I just think for Iowa, our economic future is about embracing the clean energy technologies. I know it's controversial in some places, but ethanol, I'm a big supporter of ethanol. We can make renewable liquid fuels. And the controversy there is some people say, well, ethanol has environmental impact too, and that is true. But I'd prefer to take that environmental impact over the environmental impact from oil and fossil fuel production. So, we do have to make some trade-offs, but that's Iowa's economic future. Iowa's economic future, I don't think, is just being a pass-through state for oil. I know those jobs are real for the people who are going to be working there, and that's one of the things that makes it a hard issue for me, because I have a great deal of affection for the people in the building trades, and I want them to succeed. But I also know that none of us want to endanger the future of our planet, and I think our dependence on fossil fuels, we really need to quickly move away. Do I wish we were there already? Yes. Does this pipeline help us move away from fossil fuels? I don't think it does. And for me, that's kind of the bottom line, where I think we got to choose a different direction for the future of our country.
And Bill had a point about national security, if you will. I mean, we have always been a big net importer of oil, and now with the shale technology, we have the ability to be independent of a lot of other countries that we send a lot of money to.
Yeah, and Peter, that is a concern as well. But I'm also going to tell you, the miracle that is not talked about is how well Americans are doing in reducing our fossil fuel consumption. Since 2007, we have cut our consumption by 7%. It is one of the primary reasons why prices are down. Fuel economy went from 20.8 miles per gallon in 2007. Remember when gas was $3-4 a gallon? Today we're averaging, just in 8 years, we've moved the average to over 25 miles per gallon. People are conserving. They're using ethanol and biodiesel, alternative fuels. There are more and more electric vehicles. That's the miracle, is we can have a vibrant, full employment economy without fossil fuels. That's the way to break our dependence on foreign oil. We've had some increased production in this country. There are places where that production is much more expensive than the global market. Cheryl talked about early in the program, hey, look at what the economy's doing. Is this even economically viable anymore? You don't want to invest in yesterday's technology. In my view, this is yesterday's technology. We want to embrace that future.
Well, given that it's Christmas time, we can't call it the Miracle on 34th Street, so we'll just have to call it the Miracle on 3rd Avenue at KCRG Studios. Cheryl, any other comments that you have? I mean, obviously the concerns for the environment and putting things into the ground and then monitoring them, that's always going to be an ongoing thing with the pipeline, isn't it?
Yes. My biggest concern as I sat through those meetings is watching the landowners who have had generation upon generation of, their family work the land, do the best that they can, and just be tax-paying citizens, and to have them sit there in that meeting and have a Texas oil company basically come and say, we're going to take part of your land and we're going to put crude oil through it, and we want you to sign this easement. There are a lot of different easement languages that are out there for the landowners to sign, and from what I've heard, a lot of them are very broad. They have a lot of leeway with what they can do with the land, and I just, I think for the state of Iowa, I really hope that the utility board is able to show that they care about the citizens of Iowa, because this project is all about a Texas oil company when it comes down to it. The jobs are, from what I understand, he said, maximum 2,004 Iowans. The other people will be brought in. No welders, he said, will be coming from Iowa because they don't know that type of weld, and you probably know more about that, Bill, than I do, but he said the welders will come from out of state. And it's a 6-month project, and this pipeline will be there in Iowa in perpetuity if it's built. So a lot of concerns, very long-term concerns for what the risks are.
Okay. Rob, ultimately, isn't the Utilities Board going to be accountable to the legislature since they were established? How do people and viewers that are watching this show this morning, if they want to advocate on Cheryl's side, they can go to the spot there? Do they write letters to the papers, the legislators, utility board? Go to the meet? Are there more meetings in the future, Cheryl?
There was just a meeting at the Department of Natural Resources. I'm not aware of, there's follow-up for the hearing to do. The interveners are doing briefs. Okay. They're planning their briefs right now, but as far as I know, there's not.
It's really a hard issue for citizens to be involved in. I mean, citizens are obviously free to ask their legislators to do something. My assessment is because we tried last year to try to find a consensus. We were unsuccessful in that. We could not find a consensus to improve that late 90s law that the Utilities Board is operating under. And so I think the Utilities Board is going to make the decision. There will be some legal proceedings possibly after that. I know with all the interveners on both sides, quite likely there'll be legal proceedings. Pretty hard for citizens to get directly involved. I think for citizens to get involved, contacting legislators is good. Contacting people about national climate policy is good. I like to say, Peter, every time you do something in your personal life to help the environment, and there are a lot of people who do that, be sure to let an elected official know about it, because policy does drive this. You can do all these things to try to improve the environment in your personal life, but we really do need public policy to back that up.
Okay, well, we're just down. We got just about a minute and a half left. Any final quick comment, Rob? Anything?
Well, I just where I was finishing with, we need to act on climate change. There are lots of ways for people to act on climate change. This pipeline to me is a big climate issue. It's also a water issue, also a land issue, also an economic issue. People can get involved and make a difference. I think that's the most important thing for people to know.
Cheryl, anything? Final comment? Anything? Bill? Good for the trades, good for the economy?
Good for the trades, good for the economy, good for the nation. And Rob, I agree with you more than you probably suspect. I think we need to wean ourselves from fossil fuel. But the timetable, I think, is a little further down the road. In the meantime, we might as well take advantage of the national resources we have. So,
big impact, short term, and there's still a long-term economic impact, isn't there?
Yeah, of course there is. There'll be some jobs created here, not many.
Good enough.
Permanently.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me this morning. So thank you. And on behalf of the Interreligious Council of Cedar Rapids and Lynn County, thank you for joining us this morning, and go out and make our community a better place to live, work, and grow up.
Thank you.
Thank you.